meeting of February the 13th, 2024 to order. Mr. Clerk, will you please take roll?
Chair Koo,
Here.
Councilmember Lifcott-Hames,
Here.
Councilmember Tanaka. For the record, we have two present.
Thank you so much. At this point, we'll take public comments from members of the public on items not on the agenda. Mr. Clerk, do we have any public speakers?
Chair, there are no requests to speak.
Very good, thank you. And with that, we'll move to our action items. Our first item is approval of the Office of City Auditor, fiscal year 2024, Task 4, task orders. Good evening, Ms. Crowley.
Good evening. I'm Kate Crowley. Thanks for having me here. I'm with Baker Tilly. I am here in place of Adrian McCoy. Adrian, the city auditor, is no longer with Baker Tilly. I am the partner at Baker Tilly that oversees all of our state and local government consulting functions, including internal audit. And so I came tonight to share with you the news that Adrian is no longer with us. We are working with council members, the two of you, as well as your colleagues, to determine a process to interview and appoint a new city auditor. In the meantime, I'll be involved in our presentations to the committee and to council as necessary. And Chemi Perry from Baker Tilly will also be involved. You probably know Chemi. She'll be providing the report tonight. Chemi's been with Baker Tilly and with Palo Alto since the beginning of our engagement together. She has 25 years of audit experience and has worked very closely with the two auditors from Baker Tilly that the city has had. So tonight we have two agenda items that Chemi and I will be presenting. The first is a review of the task orders. We'll be requesting approval of those tonight, but due to the circumstances of the vacancy in the city auditor position, there'll be a delay in us starting those until the new auditor is appointed. So the timeline has been moved on those, as you'll see in the supplemental memo in your packet. And Chemi will go over those. After that, Chemi will also give the quarterly report from the work that she and our team at Baker Tilly have done over the last quarter with the city. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chemi. But before that, any questions for me before we get into the task orders?
No, thank you. It's nice to see you, though. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Good evening, Telco and Professional Services Committee members. I'm Chemi Perry, Internal Audit Manager with Baker Tilly. So the first agenda item is we are requesting approval of the 5 task orders listed here. These task orders execute the FY 2024 audit plan. Before I describe each task order in the following slide, please note that task orders are attached to the staff report, packet page 7 through 26, were replaced with task orders on packet page 28 through 47, as explained in the supplemental memo on packet page 27. The task order dates were changed from January 1st through June 30th, 2024, to March 1st through December 31st, 2024, for all task orders due to a delay in starting a new audit until a new city auditor is appointed. So this is the FY 2024 audit plan approved by the City Council last month. Task order numbers shown in black in the far left column were approved last month. Task order 4.23, shown in red, is for the recruitment and succession planning audit. Our risk assessment showed concerns related to succession planning and the efficiency and effectiveness of recruitment and hiring processes. So we will review the processes and controls in these areas. Task order 4.24 is for the grant management audit. We will review the grant management activities in the pre-award phase, award phase, and post-award phase to identify the opportunities to improve grant management. Task order 4.25 is for the emergency preparedness review. We will gain an understanding of the city's overall plan, organizational structure, and the processes during our audit planning phase, but expect to focus on the wildfire preparedness during the testing phase for this year's audit. Task order 4.26 is the utility billing audit. We will review the internal controls over the accuracy and compliance of utility billing, as well as billing adjustments. Task order 4.27 is for the payment card industry, data security standard review. The new PCI DSS becomes mandatory on April 1st, 2024, so that it is important for the city to be prepared to ensure compliance. We will review the internal controls over compliance of the payment card processing for the city and the third-party service provider. So this is the end of the presentation for the agenda item number 1. Do you have any comments or questions for me?
So I'm looking at the dates from January 1st, 2024 to June. That was 6 months. Now we're postponing it a little bit, understandable, but it's 9 months. Is it so that the new auditor can catch up? Okay. Yes.
We do not know when the new auditors are appointed, and we learned last year that it's just inefficient to keep coming back to the committee to extend the task order if there's any delay. So we decided to have a longer term so that we have room to decide which audit can go first, which audit can be started a little bit later.
Thank you. And so tonight you're looking for PNS to recommend approval of 4.23 to 4.27?
Yes.
Correct.
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. I am new to this committee, and so I have a question that may just reflect my my status. In looking at the detail on the various task orders, for example, recruitment and succession planning versus grant management, just to take two that are next to each other. The only differences that I see attachment A, description of scope of services for both seems identical, except for perhaps the dollar amount allocated, right? And so the detail on what the task order is really just that first page. So if I was trying to understand a little bit more about what we mean by recruitment and succession planning, or what we mean by grant management, that is not in these documents. Is that right?
For in the presentation, no. For in the task order, we described at the high level. So the primary objectives should be same in this screen and in the task order. We have the little bit more detail, like interview, reviewing the documents, that kind of information is in the task order. But the primary objective should be same here and in the task order. And amounts and hours should also agree between this document and the task order. This document, it came from the approved audit plan. So nothing has been changed since it has been approved.
So in summary, the audit plan has the detail. The beginning of the task order has some detail, and then the third column on this table that is part of the presentation tonight provides that. But you're correct that some of the scope language is repetitive from task order to task order, and it can be confusing.
And if there's no, so we should go out for public comments on this. So Mr. Clerk, do we have any public comments?
Chair, there are no requests to speak.
Okay, very good. Do we do this one first? Recommend approval and then move to the next one, or?
Excuse me, it's up to you, the discretion of the chair, if you would like to hear all of the task orders and to just move to approve each of them together, you can do that, or you can do motion by motion. It's up to you.
I think, Ms. Perry, you've already presented on all of them? Yes, so with that, I think we can just go ahead and take a motion to move recommendation of approval of FY 2024 Task 4 task orders.
So moved.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll second. Mr. Clerk, if you take the vote.
Councilmember Lifcott Hames,
Yes.
Chair Ku,
Yes,
the motion carries.
thank you. And we'll move on to our second item, which is the Office of the City Auditor, presentation of the quarterly report for the period of October to December 2023.
Yes. Scope of the service in the agreement between the city and Baker Tilly lists 6 tasks. So I'm reporting our activities by task for the period from October through December 2023. Task one, we presented the annual risk assessment report to the Policy and Service Committee on December 12th. For task 2, we prepared the FY 2024 audit plan based on the results of the risk assessment conducted under task 1 and presented to the Policy and Service Committee on December 12th. For task 3, the city auditor coordinated with the city's external financial auditor and presented the FY 2023 audited financial statements to the Finance Committee on November 28th. Task 4 is to execute the annual audit plan. We presented the wastewater treatment plant agreement audit report and investment management audit report to the Policy and Services Committee on December 12th. For task 5, that includes periodic reporting, hotline monitoring, and other administrative functions. We proposed some changes to the city's fraud, waste, and abuse hotline administrative policy and obtained the city council's consent on November 13th. For task 6, evaluation and benchmarking, there was no activity to report in this quarter. To give you an overall status of audits, this table shows the status of all audits listed in the FY 2023 audit plan. The first line item, task order 4.8, shows the status of ongoing. This project is monthly monitoring of the project cost billed by the vendor for public safety building construction. The task order end date is March 31st, 2024, and the report will be presented to this committee soon after the task order end date. 3 items, task order 4.16, 4.19, and 4.20 show the status of reporting phase. We are currently trying to finalize the reports with management responses for these 3 audits. We will present the reports to this committee soon. Regarding the last 2 audits, long-range planning and ADA compliance, in April 2023, when the fiscal year end was approaching, we evaluated the status of FY 2023 audit plan, which was that 7 audits were to be completed and 3 task orders 4.8, 4.20, and task order for task 5 needed additional budget due to a timeline or scope change. So in May 2023, we obtained an approval to adjust the resources by moving the budget from these two audits, long-range planning and ADA compliance, to three existing task orders I just mentioned.
Excuse me, could you just move the slide? We can't see this. The slide isn't showing the long range.
Okay, so these are the last two lines I mentioned. Based on the updated annual risk assessment and audit planning consideration, long-range planning was deferred and ADA compliance was included in the FY 2024 audit plan. For fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, there was no activity in this period. So this is the end of the presentation for agenda item number 2.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Any questions? No. So I wanted to ask, how do you, for the ADA compliance with Public Works, are you evaluating just at Public Works or is this citywide?
For now, we are planning to do, review the public works, but we will do the initial audit planning, and that's where we look at the overview, where more risks are, where it makes sense for us to spend time and look at it. So it can be certain area, it could be citywide. So right now we're looking at looking at the public works, but it can extend.
Very good, thank you. I was just kind of wondering if it was just that facility, that department, or is it through that department that you're looking at compliance? I appreciate that. With regards to fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, do you believe that there is clarity to people who report to that? It's about not reporting for personnel abuse or to that fact, but rather actual product abuse, waste and fraud?
So this is more city auditors. I don't even have access to system. This information was obtained by Adrian before she left. But we reviewed the policy, and we've also seen the system that employee can plug in the information to report the fraud, abuse, and waste. So it seems like mechanisms are in place, but I do not know how much the information is spread throughout the employees.
Okay, I think, just to make sure that that hotline is used correctly and how it's communicated to employees, that might be, just want to see if that has been vetted and used correctly. Thank you. If we don't have any other comments or questions, I really appreciate that. That's a lot of audits that you're doing, and it's really good to see that, there's recommendations and corrections, if any, but that there is audits that's been done and that the government is performing well. And with that, I'll take a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the committee recommend that the council accept the Office of the City Auditor's quarterly status report covering October through December 2023.
Thank you, ma'am. And I will second it. And Mr. Clerk, if you'll take the vote, please.
Yes, and I'll just state for the record that there's no request to speak.
Oh, thank you.
Chair Koo,
Yes,
Councilmember Lifcott-Hames,
Yes.
the motion carries.
thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Perry and Ms. Crowley.
Thank you.
All right, we move to item number 3, which is a referral from City Council to discuss and recommend City Council procedures and protocols on council discretionary expenditures, consideration of the establishment of appropriate parameters for council discretionary expenditures, and whether to allocate $2,000 annually from the City Council contingency fund for each council member to decide its purpose. Ma'am, yes.
Thank you. Good evening. Chantel Cotton Gaines, Deputy City Manager. And also City Attorney Stump will be joining us to help with a discussion on this. She is en route from upstairs. So I will give the overview just to get us started. As you all recall, at the City Council meeting last Monday, you discussed many of the referrals that council sent to policy and services. This is the last one that this committee has not yet sent a recommendation back to council on. So I know this is a new formation of this committee, but this is the remaining topic that council sent. This one in particular has a few sub-questions. So the idea was to be able to use some of council's contingency funding in order to potentially have a different use than what is the current process for part of the council contingency funding. So some of the questions that are outlined in the staff report, this is on packet page 51, have to do with some of the sub-questions that the committee can consider. So one is a policy matter. Does the city council wish to allocate some of those contingency funds to council members to spend at their discretion within limits defined by law and policy that you can set? And if the answer to that is yes, then what is the amount that this committee would like to recommend to the city council? And the third question is what purpose or purposes does the committee want to recommend to the council to define uses for these expenditures? And lastly, in light of the identified purpose or purposes, what procedures are appropriate? So sort of a way to think about this in a flow chart of if you think that that's a good use of some of those funds, yes, then keep going down the list of questions. So myself, as well as City Attorney Stump, are present and available to answer questions as you go through. Ms. Stump, did you want to add anything else?
No, that was a great summary. Thank you.
That concludes our presentation.
Do we have any comments, public comments, before we come back to council for discussion? I mean, to the committee.
Chair, there's no request to speak.
Thank you. Councilmember Lithcott Haynes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Cotton Gaines. Being a new member of the committee, I am grappling with these issues deeply for the first time, and I'm curious as to what recent past practice of the council has been. Is this a reaction in response to a long-held concern, request? Is this something we used to have and no longer have? What's the context in which this current referral sits?
Historically, the city has not had any kind of a program like this. So I think this was an idea. I don't know if any city staff remember when the idea came up, but it got referred to the committee to work on.
Yes, so this was something that last year when we reorganized the entire handbook, we made some changes on how the mayor and the vice mayor can make recommendations for use of the council contingency funding. And in that discussion, members of the council brought up the idea that it might be an interesting thing to explore of whether we can allocate a certain amount of funding of the council contingency to individual council members for uses within a policy that we would establish. So that was the first ideation around that came up.
And where did the $2,000 per council member figure come from?
That was the one that passed as the motion that day at council. So in the idea of trying to, I believe, let me double check that. But if the number is in there, I believe that's what came from council. Yes, that was the motion. So the dialogue that happened, this was April last year, was whether or not we should make any allocations. And through that discussion, the council said, well, if we were to do something, probably we shouldn't do more than $2,000 per council member.
So you can see that it's a little, were we to
Circuitous?
give 2,000, what would we use it for? But let's put a number in place. Okay.
Correct.
That's helpful. I appreciate that. And do we have any, what's the logical argument against this? Other than we can't afford $14,000 a year, which I don't think is a very compelling one.
So I'm not sure staff feels like we want to weigh in on the pros and cons, but I would make an observation, which is that based on what we've described here in terms of the legal restrictions and the need for procedures, this is not straightforward or simple. So it will take, I think, a fair amount to develop this program. And that's discussion starting tonight. Certainly staff will support you if this is something you want to do, but for a relatively small amount of funding, there could be some complexities here, and you will need a written policy. There are certain things that are legally prohibited, and so you will need to describe what it is that you want the funds to be used for within the areas that are not prohibited, and then we'll need to set up appropriate procedures to make those expenditures. And we described just some of those issues in this report.
I will just add as a final thought, not a question. As a council member, I have expended personal funds on things I would think of as official duties, on the support I've needed to just be able to conduct myself in this role, including paying for intern support or what some people might think of as office staff. I think people may not appreciate that as Palo Alto council members, we don't have, I know like in other cities, we don't have our own staff. We turn to, ourselves and our families and volunteers to get stuff done, or we pay for it out of pocket, receiving very little on the front end by way of compensation for this role. So there is a lot to this role that is expensive for us. And for that reason, I'm finding myself sort of remembering the conversation that led to this referral, feeling like I could probably make use of that without knowing what the burden on staff would be and not wanting ever to create burden on staff. The merit of having a little bit of discretionary money so that we're not out of pocket for things that we're doing in furtherance of city work feels compelling to me.
Sure. Like if you look at other cities, like let's say, for instance, Mountain View or neighboring city, they get a stipend and it's actually much larger than this. It's not 2,000. I think it's like 12,000 or something. I forgot the exact amount, and staff could look it up. But they use it for their cell phones. Like, so I have a lot of constituents calling me on my cell phone. I pay the full bill. I get no reimbursement. Staff has cell phones, but we reimburse it fully. I have office hours every Sunday. I use a Zoom account. I pay for that myself personally, right? Hundreds of dollars, right? But I do it because I want to make sure that the community is informed and we're transparent. A lot of cities have like staff, right, for council members. We have zero. Not a single penny goes to that. So it's basically volunteers or being able to have some sort of even just a stipend amount would be really good, just to show some gratitude to the people that help make us more effective. So, I think for all those reasons, I still support this. I think it's actually very much on the low side to me. It would make sense to match Mountain View. But this is what passed was 2,000. But I would be open to having it equal to Mountain View because I don't think our work is any less or our expenses are any less than what it is in our neighboring city.
Thank you, Councilmember Tanaka. Do you happen to have any other comparative data? I know how facile you are with the data, so I'm guessing you might have the Mountain View budget, number of people in Mountain View, a little bit of comparison to us.
Yeah. So Mountain View is, they have a way smaller budget. Our budget is about $1 billion. Theirs is a fraction of ours. They have a small account. They have only 5 people. We have more voters. We have a much bigger budget. We have a very active community, as you know, and to be honest, the community wants us to be accessible and to be involved, and so But yeah, I mean, for the years, I've just been paying out of pocket for all these expenses. So, and it's way past $2,000 a year, clearly, but as it is for other council members in other cities. But this is why I think it's probably a good idea. I mean, it's not for us to use for campaign funds or anything like that. It's literally to use, I would propose that we just copy the policy from Mountain View. So it's not a lot of work for staff, and even the dollar amount to make it just really clear. But that's, a lot of cities do something similar, or some other cities are actually much more generous than Mountain View. But Mountain View is probably the closest example to us.
I appreciate the public perception piece when you said we are expected to be very present, involved. I was berated yesterday by somebody for not working full-time for the city. And it just showed that there's a misperception about what our role is and what we try to bring to it. If you had a motion in mind on that, I might be inclined to support. I'd love to know if you could pull up the actual Mountain View amount.
So while you're looking for that, definitely, if there is a policy from Mountain View, it'd be nice to see it, as well as potentially what other cities that has such a policy on appropriating funding to each of the council members and how they, what their policy entails. I think we all spend money our own in order to, in this role as city council member. And I think some of the concerns that I have is just generally a lot to do with ethics, AB 1, 2, 3, 4. And while you talk about why we're in this memo, it says to avoid conflicts of interest. I think there's a big part of it where there's also the perceptions of avoiding conflicts of interest. And perceptions is a really big part of it, as you had said, Councilmember Lithcott-Hames, that, you were berated by somebody from the public about you're not working fully as a city council member. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But at the same time, I think that having the funding, whether it's necessary or not, is there are certain things we're working for the public, but it doesn't have to entail funding if you don't want to fund it, if you don't want to come out of pocket for it. So I also think that, is it worth it for staff time to be developing this kind of a policy? And I don't know how much is involved in developing this policy, how much time it would take in order to develop it for this amount. And I would have to say that in campaigning, I do see that there are advantages that has been taken by certain people that are already in office, using their office and funding from that office in order to further themselves. So I do have concerns about this. It has to be something that is going to be really reviewed and looked at, so that there's no improprieties that can be that can come up. Then I also wonder, does that mean that our use of this fund, if a policy is created, can it be an audit as well? Yeah, I think that might be one way of ensuring that that funding is not being used in the wrong way. I think even with staff, when they have appropriate a certain amount, or they have use of their P cards, it's very, very strict. So how strict is this going to be is another question. Anyways, did you find it?
Still looking.
So while he's looking, I can offer that there is state law that pertains to this type of use. It's described briefly in the report on the bottom of, I say packet page 32. So there are state law procedures. It does limit the use of the funds to actual and necessary expenses. So that's a minimum, of course, that are incurred in the course of official duties. Yes. That's That's what my copy says. Oh.
It's on packet page 52.
Thank you.
It says
So-
general legal restrictions, the following are state and federal law prohibition on certain types of expenditures of public funds.
Yes, and then there's a paragraph there that's in bold. It says reimbursement for expenses related to official duties. It's very close to the end of this report. So there are these state law requirements. They're a minimum. And they do also require that there are some details in state law about reimbursement rates for mileage, and documentation that must be submitted. So receipts are required, those sort of standard good practices for documentation are required. And you do need to have a written policy. So you would want to address things like whether a personal account, a Zoom account that maybe is a multi-use account that you're using for various purposes, how that could be allocated. You would want to address, I'm hearing from at least 2 committee members that there might be some stipends that individual council members are paying to assistants. So there are some complex issues there that we would need to explore. So that would be need to be described in a policy if that was something you were interested in allowing council members to pay for. Yeah, so we would work on that, and definitely agree with council members' comments that other cities that have policies are a great starting point. But we're special in Palo Alto in a number of ways, and I'm sure that we will want to customize. So we'll do some work on this if this is the direction that council wishes us to go.
Can I ask, how does labor laws apply for assistants and interns, on a stipend? Is there?
So that is a good question. I do not know the answer to it. This current situation where council members use various methods to assist you, those folks who assist you are not city employees. That is important for the city because city employees, we are regulated in how we treat and supervise those folks. Certain training is required that your assistants don't get, and they're not supervised by any regular city staff who have checked the appropriate boxes for being able to be supervisors. So we would need to look at whether if public funds were used to, in part, to pay for these folks, whether that would bring a whole set of other requirements with it about how those folks are identified, selected, managed, et cetera.
Including liability?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Lithgar Hames?
I just think we do a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge about the city council sometimes in this city. We're $1 billion city. We have 7 people who make $5 an hour to do the work of the city and have to pay for our own expenses out of pocket. And so I think what we're looking at here is, are we going to recognize that to be a city council member is real work? It takes hours out of the day and the week and the month and the year. We're going to get to that in the next item. It costs us money. And why is it that a city of our stature, prominence, budget would say, yes, and you're going to receive very little compensation for this, and reasonable expenses are yours to pay for out of your own pocket, such that it might almost cost you money to be on city council? I really think that's what we're facing right now. To me, Councilmember Tanaka, Chair Ku, that's the bigger question. Because what it gets to is who can afford to sit up here? Who can afford to run for office? Who can afford to earn this compensation to be in this office? Who can afford the out-of-pocket expenses? And what are the equity issues inherent, or the inequity issues inherent in that being the reality? So I'm glad we're having this discussion. Obviously, it's got to be subject to rules and legal restrictions. But I am feeling that this is an opportunity for us to move out of this sort of, when the landed gentry ran the city, You look at all those guys, I don't know how many of them on the wall, the former mayors were wealthy and they didn't have to worry about this. But in 2024, we have people on this dais who rent. We have people of various income means. And I do worry that one's ability to be effective in the role of city council without having the opportunity for reasonable expenses to be reimbursed is an issue of equity and something therefore that's of great concern to me.
Councilmember Tanaka.
So I just, I couldn't find it via Google, so I texted some council members in Mountain View. So I'll tell you what they told me. So they get $900 a year for a cell phone plan and related type expenses. So $900 for that, $4,000 for like what we use our iPads, computers, etc. Then $8,000. So altogether is about $13,000 a year. So we're at $2,000 a year. We're talking about 1/6 the amount that Mountain View does, which has a budget that is 1/5 of ours. So just put that into perspective. She's in the council meeting right now, so she can't send me the link, but when I get it, I can forward it to everyone.
So, since we still have information that we're looking for, would it be perhaps better to just have it continued and come back with the information that is requested so that we can delve into it further before recommending anything further to council? Councilman Tanaka?
Well, we kind of talked about this for a while now. So what I propose we do, and this is maybe not, we probably refine it more, but it's a good starting point, is I propose that we just adopt Mountain View's policy and use it as a starting point. The rest of the council could look at that. They could edit it. They could modify it. They could increase amounts. They could decrease amounts. But it's a starting point. It's something which I'm sure their city attorney has gone through with a fine tooth comb. It's something that they've been doing for as long as the people that I know on council have been on. And we go put the Paul also touch on it as well. But just get the ball
Is your
rolling.
proposal a motion?
I'll make a motion. Yeah, I'll make a motion that we adopt Mountain View's policy that they have for the council for expenses as Paul Alto's.
Second.
Do you want to speak to it?
No, I just did.
Thank you. You don't. So I just want to say that completely, this is, there's simply not enough information for me to support this motion. I think I would really like to see that not only our staff, including the city attorney's office, take a review of this, but also human resources take a review of this. Dealing with staff and with interns on public funds, using public funds, is a matter that we do have to look a little bit deeply into. So I will not be supporting it. We already went to members of the public. So, Councilmember Lithcott Hames.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I realized I should have addressed that point when I seconded. I really found compelling the motion maker's argument that a city just to our south, which we respect, has come up with this policy. It's, it's a comparable for me. And just given time, we meet once a month. We can spend time getting the Mountain View policy, getting that in front of council. Council has already asked us to look at the concept. We now have a concept we think is a comparable and perhaps favorable. And, I think that those will be the materials that we look at. So just for expediency, I thought it made sense to move this forward rather than have us wait until March and then not get to council until perhaps June.
May I be heard?
Yes.
So this conversation is very helpful in respect of focusing very quickly on a purpose, which allows us to structure what we do next in terms of your support from your professional staff. If the committee proceeds in this way, it is my professional obligation to advise the city and to advise the city council. With all due respect to my colleagues in Mountain View, I have not seen this policy. I will need to get it, read it, and give council my advice on this issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Attorney. I do want to also say that, just looking at one city's policy on expenditures for council members is simply not enough. But I appreciate that we have our staffing, including attorney's office, as well as our human resources and our city manager's office, that should vet for our city and not just take on a neighboring city, no matter how great they are. And they are a great city. But I think that it should be clearly vetted by our own staff who knows our city and procedures. City manager?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to reiterate and echo the city attorney's comments that if this proceeds as I think you're headed to make a recommendation to the full council, we'll have to review the Mountain View policy as well, and would advise you both from human resources as well as procurement and any other applicable issues that we want to bring to your attention.
One more consideration as well. From other policies that we have sent from this committee to the full council, it has helped the full council when the committee has had a chance to actually sort of comb through the details. So that's something for the committee to consider, of whether you would like staff to do some work on a policy and bring it here for you to review before you send it to the full council. Or we can do that background work that Ms. Stump and Mr. Shikata talked about and take that to council. But typically, for the other items that we've done and the procedures and protocols, this committee has wanted to spend a little more time on the actual words that you would be proposing. So just offering that for consideration.
Thank you, Madam Ms. Gaines. Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, I was going to recommend, if the seconder is open to it, just based on some of the comments, maybe what would be good is, I think we could use Mountain View as the baseline, and then there's other cities around us which staff could put in as comparison, and so that our fellow council members could look at that and see what's best for our city. So I don't know if the seconder would be open to that, but maybe that'll be good to offer so that our fellow colleagues can kind of see, some comparisons and contrast.
So I am very excited by that. And I wonder also, listening to the comments, whether we're setting our council colleagues up for frustration, that they are going to be the ones who are asked to walk through it and do the comparison. And would you accept a friendly amendment that this is, I don't know if it's not a referral when we give it back to ourselves. If we look at next month, getting the, if we're able to acquire more comparables besides Mountain View, review it once more here, come up with a motion that we're ready to put forward to council, then we can fully stand behind it once it's brought to council.
I don't feel that strongly one way or the other. So I think our chair feels strongly about it. So maybe we should do that to kind of try to get more buy-in. Yeah.
So let's clear this motion. I want to very clear if I'm going to buy into this. So you're proposing the motion be that have staff look at Mountain View, evaluate Mountain Views as the baseline, and also look at other cities and bring it back to policy and services so that we can review it and understand a little bit better what the policies are from different cities and narrow it down to what policies we would like to recommend.
Yes, and I would add that obviously we've heard from the city attorney and city manager that they would want to weigh in on with advice or concerns, and it'd be great if we could bundle all of that together.
And now I want to ask about the calendar. Can we bring it back next month, or is it gonna?
There should be room on the calendar next month. As of right now, we'll have the race and equity update and potentially an audit report. I'm not sure which audit reports, but we'll try to limit your number of items to 4, and we'll put this as one of them. It requires some time to do the work is the bigger question, and I'm looking at the person that has the heaviest lift to do that.
So yes, although, we may be constrained in terms of the survey work we'll be able to do to gather other comparables. I think some initial inquiries may have been made, and I'm sure that we will find some information for the committee, but I hope that you're realistic about what we're able to do in this time frame. And we also would not, I think what we're likely to do is to bring forward a number of points for clarification or discussion and not actual policy language until we hear from the committee, unless there are no issues or details to be worked out, but that would surprise me. So yes, we can come back. Please be realistic about what we can accomplish in that time period, given the other, and there are many important policy projects we're working on. Okay, so the committee meets once a month, right. So Deputy Manager reminds me that for a meeting that occurs in 1 month, we have 2 weeks to do our work because of the publication schedule.
Notification, right?
Yes.
All right, I don't see any lights or okay, Councilmember Lifcott-Hames.
I know 11 days is our preference, but 3 days is our legal obligation, right, on packets? So we do have a little wiggle room.
It's council's policy, and we make absolutely every effort to meet it because it's our understanding it is your policy.
And we try not to do the 3-day thing, so we really try to ask staff to stick with the 11-day. It's generally good policy for transparency and confidence and trust in government so that the public knows what's going on. Do you have any more comments? Councilmember Lithcott-Hames? No. All right, please take the vote, Mr. Clerk.
Chair Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaga, yes. Councilmember Lifcott-Hames,
Yes.
the motion carries.
Thank you so much. Thank you, staff. And now we'll move to our last item, which is another referral. Item number 4 is a city council referral to discuss the creation of a citizen advisory committee to evaluate city council member compensation above Senate Bill 329 guidelines. Another compensation.
Yes, lots of compensation this evening. There's not a formal staff report on this. I will just briefly give you the information. The motion that passed out of City Council in December last year asks that this committee consider whether there should be a creation of an advisory committee, a citizens advisory committee related to this topic. And if so, what are some of the parameters that you would be interested in for that committee? If there's an interest in a ballot measure for this fall, which would be the November election, that would require council to send it to the ballot by this June. So that gives you a sense of the timing, which is why we did want to get this item in front of the committee. If you would like to create an advisory committee, they of course need to do their work in enough time for that action to happen by council by June. So that's all we have to offer, and we can answer any questions, but I think it was more a discussion amongst the committee.
So the recommendation was whether we should create one or that we do create one.
The actual motion.
Refer to
Give me a
that.
second. I have a lot of tabs open. Okay, so the actual motion from council is referred to the Policy and Services Committee for a recommendation regarding creation of a Citizens Advisory Committee to evaluate council member compensation above SB 329 guidelines. So it's a little open to interpretation. You can interpret that as direction for sure to create one and to give them the parameters, or I suppose you could make a recommendation that maybe you shouldn't create one if that was the committee consensus.
All right.
And
Thank you.
I would add, if you are going to recommend creating one. There are questions. How big should it be? How should the members be selected? What should the time period should the group be given to provide its recommendation?
Thank you. Councilmember Lithcott Hames.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was item 3 in a 4-part motion. The motion begins to direct staff return to council with an ordinance to be placed on consent calendar with an effective date of January 1, 2025 at the earliest, to raise monthly salaries at a minimum to level set by SB 329, allow city council members to participate in city's employee childcare assistance, refer to PNS for a recommendation regarding creation of a citizens advisory committee to evaluate the compensation above the guidelines for semi-annually placed on consent calendar, cost of living adjustment. So to my mind, the heavy work of whether this concept is moving forward to the voters has been done by council, and our work simply is to devise as I recall it, what item 3 is getting at is we didn't want to be setting our own salary increase. We thought members of the community, a citizens advisory committee, would be better equipped, less biased, perhaps unbiased, more objective regarding whether the amount should be above SB 329 guidelines, and if so, what that amount should be. So I just wanted to clarify what I think the question is here. We were really clear as council, we should not be the ones setting it. A citizen advisory council committee would be great. And we've got to figure that piece out. Who are they going to be? Let them be the ones to decide, should the council get more than what is allowed according to SB 329?
Thank you. Madam Attorney.
Yes, so a little bit of additional context. The salary is currently set in the municipal code. I believe the amount is $900.
1,000.
1,000, thank you. The charter says that salary is set by the council by ordinance according to the rules in state law. So your current salary in your ordinance is 1,000, and state law has allowed for an increase. So what I understood the council to do is proceed in 2 steps. We have been directed under item 1 to go ahead and prepare an ordinance, which council has the authority to pass, to raise it to the amount currently allowed, which I believe is 1,600. So it is an increase. It's not very much. And that is in process. That will come on your consent calendar. I am hopeful that happens in February, could be early March, but it cannot be effective by law until next January anyway. So that's underway. What I understood number 3 to be is for a citizen group to explore changing the charter and removing what the charter now places a limit and says that council salary is limited to what's provided in state law. As a charter city, Palo Alto doesn't have to limit itself. You could set compensation at greater than the amounts provided in state law. And my understanding was this number 3 is to explore that possibility. And I don't believe council has made a decision on why council has not made a decision on whether to place something before the voters to remove that restriction to what is provided in state law and what to replace it with. That would be what the committee would do.
Did you have your light on again?
No.
No, okay. I'm sorry. It must have been, did you want to say anything?
Still gathering my thoughts. You could go first.
Okay. No, I was going to go to public comments, if any. Mr. Clerk?
Chair, there are no requests to speak.
Very good. In that case, I guess then we need to I guess the first question would be, do we have an advisory committee or do we not have an advisory committee?
Madam Chair? may I?
Yes, ma'am.
My clear recollection from our conversation on the dais was a number of us were wanting this question of should compensation be higher than that allowed by SB 329? And equally clear that we were not the ones who could answer that question objectively, since we would be, or our future colleagues would be, the recipients of that money. And so I think it was put to us to create that citizen advisory committee and let them figure out the answer to this question. I don't think whether to create the citizen advisory committee is really the question before us. I feel that was a clear signal from council. So if colleagues agree and staff agrees, I think the pertinent question is who should be on that committee? What does prior experience teach us about how these committees are effectively comprised? How many people? Who typically does it? Do we have staff support for such committees? I think we move forward to creating, to recommending what this committee would look like.
Do you have any comments on?
I really don't, because I've not participated in the formation of such a committee before. So I'm thinking about boards and commissions and ad hocs and other smaller bodies. But, you know, I know we've had these groups in place for other subjects, and I think others here have more experience than I do.
Any guidance from staff?
Well, once again, I think the question may come back to what have we done previously? And at this point, we have not undertaken the research to see whether there are examples of a similar effort undertaken. I will note that when this motion was raised and brought forward from the council, I commented that the support for an effort like this in order to make a November ballot would be a challenge because it's not currently on our work plan, and depending on the level of research requested by a citizens advisory committee, it could be a significant undertaking. And at that time, I will share that it was my understanding from the comments from the maker of the motion that the timeframe of getting to the ballot in November was not the driver. So that said, you know, certainly the council's prerogative to change that, but I do want to point out that we're not currently anticipating this, so we'll need to prioritize it if it is the council's interest, and can factor that into the priority work and choices that will be before the council in early March.
Thank you. So, this is a big matter in terms of evaluating compensation, especially if it's looking at full compensation. Does that involve benefits and retirement and all of that? And I think in a way, I'm glad to hear that you remind us that it wasn't a driver to get this to the ballot in November, because I do believe rushing this process is not a good idea at all. I think this has to be vetted very carefully in addition with the members of the public. I guess, would we have an idea of what kind of timeline we would need in order to, well, first to get members of the citizens in the advisory, so kind of look through all of who would be part of it, come up with a purpose statement, who is a neutral third party to guide it through. But then also the Citizens Advisory Committee, I think that we do have to have a staff on it too, so that that process can be guided, and also to see, from our human resources also. Yes, Ms. Gaines.
The closest example that comes to mind in the last maybe 7 years we can think of is the Community Advisory Committee related to rail, which became the XCAP. I can't think of what the CAP actually stands for right now. But the original CAP, before it became XCAP, was something where we did an application process, and people that were interested were able to submit their names And staff collected those and reviewed those and presented the recommended names. And then the council still went through and confirmed those members. So that was an example of a process that could be used. In some other cases, there could just be a recommendation from each council member for a committee person that they would want to recommend. But either way, you would want the full council to have sort of a confirmation of the names is typically how I would see something like this. But there's a lot of flexibility in how the council can move forward with it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Ms. Gaines. Mr. Councilmember Tanaka?
Yeah, so on this one, I think in terms of like reimbursing expenses, to me, this is, I think many would find it hard to argue that people shouldn't get reimbursed for expenses because, people shouldn't be losing thousands of dollars every year doing something which, as many said, has been very low pay. But I think when it comes down to raising our own pay, our own salary, I think I'm with the chair. I think we have to be very, very cautious here because otherwise it looks very much like self-dealing. And this is one of the reasons why I voted against it. And so I think if we do move forward, even though I don't think this is what we should, I totally agree. We shouldn't be losing money, so we should reimburse our expenses. But in terms of paying ourselves more, I think we should have a very inclusive committee. So I think the CAC process is not bad. I think it's something that we should put an ad out in the papers or however we advertise for this kind of stuff. I guess the clerk kind of does this. Put an ad out, ask interested parties to apply. And we should be fairly inclusive. So I think we should, it shouldn't be a select group of 3 people who figure this out. I think it should be a very inclusive group. I think that there should be some sort of staff resources to help staff this. So if they have to get, numbers from other cities or research, and they need that. In fact, I would love to get, this is in terms of the makeup of this, we may need perhaps research in terms of how to form the committee or what's going to be best practices. But I think we have to be, every step of the way, it has to be completely independent, especially of the people on the council right now, where it's not, there's no appearance of self-serving, which I think is very different than expenses, because expenses of money, we're actually paying out of our own pocket, we're losing money. This one is we're getting extra money for no additional work per se. So I think that this one we have to be very, very cautious on. And so we should kind of know how was this done in other cities, how do other cities raise their pay, and so that it's very clear that this was done in a fair, transparent, open process. I don't think we should rush it. I think that would be a mistake. I think there could be a lot of people complaining about that, and at the end, we as council members, we report to the people, right? That's the people who elected us. That's our boss. And so because the people are our boss, I would say that it's important that the people vote on it because, if we wanted to, like for my company, if I wanted to get a raise from my company, I have to go to the board of directors, right? Our board of directors or our bosses is the people. So to me, having the people, I think what the process should be, we have a very inclusive committee, to reach out. We make sure that they have all the research that they need so they can make a really clear, unbiased, transparent decision. It goes on the ballot, and then our ultimate boss, which is the people who elect us, vote on it. Because usually it's your boss that gives you a raise, not yourself. So I think that's a really important piece of the process. And so this is what I like to see, although in general, I don't support this idea. But in terms of just trying to make it transparent to the people and making sure that there's no self-dealing appearance going on, I think this is what we should do.
Thank you, Councilmember Tanaka. Councilmember Liscott-Hames.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate my colleagues' comments. I have a slightly different take on this. I think it should not be politicized at all. We're talking about what is adequate compensation for a job that has not had its compensation looked at in quite some time. So when I think who is best equipped, I think about, can we find former city managers who are retired but still in the region who have some appreciation of cost of living and what the workload is, and might they be sort of a blue ribbon panel if such a set of people, 3 of them existed, might they have the right sort of distance and perspective. Or city managers at other cities that are comparable around the region. There are people who advise us. I know when I did my council member orientation with whatever organization had us come to Sacramento, what is it, Council of Cities? Cal Cities, I mean. The consultant we've worked with there, somebody who has a sense of the various systems and rules and policies by which cities that are sort of comparable to us gather up themselves. Mary, what is her last name? Egan, thank you. Mary Egan strikes me as somebody who is wise and smart and knows a whole lot about things well beyond Palo Alto, but also gets Palo Alto really well. I think it would be great to have some citizens on the committee as well. But this isn't about, should we have a council, should we not? Should council be paid or not? This is what is fair and adequate compensation for this work. And so that is why I'd like some folks who have some city governance experience, significant city governance experience, helping advise our community about the options and about what might be most equitable.
Okay, so let's start with how many in the committee do you see? So XCAP had what, 15, 17? Yeah, they had that's like way too many, right? So how many members do you see in this advisory committee?
I was thinking 5, maybe 3.
I was thinking 5 or 7.
Okay.
Councilmember Tanaka?
Well, I think this is such an important decision because it's compensating the people who govern the city. So I think the CAC was good because it had the diverse number of opinions. And we want that. We want kind of representation, especially when it's something as serious as compensating ourselves. And like I said, I think to avoid the appearance of self-dealing, I think more people the better. So I think a diverse set of people is great. Actually, I like the idea of maybe 40 former city managers or HR people is probably a good idea. But I just think that when we have such a small number, I think the parents would be in the public that this is some sort of elite group that is not necessarily representative of the community. So I think that, like I said, I think we need to be very inclusive as to who's on here. It shouldn't be some elite group of people that decide this matter or have influence on this matter. So I think 5 is too small. I think we may find that there aren't only 5 people who actually care about this. I don't know. So it'll be what it is. But I think we should make all attempts to be very inclusive. So for that matter, I almost say anyone that lives in our city who wants to be on this thing should almost be on it, up to maybe what the CAC site is. And having some professionals on there too. So actually, I think it's a good idea too. So I'm all game for that as well. But I don't think we want to make it small elite committee. I think that would seem kind of odd. I mean, especially if it's smaller than council. I mean, that seems even more odd. So yeah, I think a Big 10 here is probably the right way to go.
Can we do an odd number?
Well, I
11?
said like 15. Like I think 15. I think the CAC is good because it's the great thing about the CAC. I'm not sure if you guys were. I know our chairs, but the CAC was dealing with a very thorny issue. But the great thing was because it's so big, you had all different types of perspectives, and that's something that you get when you have a larger committee. And the other thing it gives you buy-in in the community. People kind of buy into it because everyone feels kind of represented. When you have a really small committee, the problem is it's hard to have that kind of buy-in. People, yeah. So anyways, I think it's safer for us to kind of shoot for a bigger committee, and you may find that the stuff is too boring for people to want to participate. But I think we should have that door open so that people have the ability, and we should have open, transparent meetings. So when there is a meeting, they should all be publicized, televised, YouTube, whatever, so that everyone can give their 2 cents, and that there's no smoke-filled room type of stuff going on, right?
So just following up on Councilmember Tanaka's comment, this committee, because it's being created by council, will be a Brown Act body. So that means it will need to assemble a quorum. So whatever number a majority has to make themselves available for meetings, and they do need to be open to the public. Thank you.
And on a matter of this size, I think definitely it should be a committee that is under the Brown Act and notice to the public. All right, so we got one down. Um, yes, ma'am.
What number was decided? I'm sorry.
Well, there's no decision.
Okay, just making sure I
Councilmember
didn't miss it.
Tanaka said 15, Councilmember Lithcott Haynes said between 3 and 5, and I said 5 to 7. So can we come to can we help staff then? I mean, I'm
I'm
okay
happy
with
to
the
move my
15.
number higher. That's fine.
Yeah,
I want it to not drag on for 18 months. I don't think this is a conversation that should take that long. And I don't want us to spend more money having this conversation than the dollar amount we end up talking about increasing council salary by.
yeah. It will take a lot of discussion. I kind of see the community looking into that a little bit further. So in terms of timeline, I have no idea what that's going to be like. I mean, what are you looking to set the timeline? A year? It's not going to work in 6 months. I really doubt that. I don't see it happening.
Well, like I said, I think it should be a very deliberative process that's really open to the community. And, my experience as with the chair is that, to be transparent and inclusive, I agree, it's hard to fast track this because I think that there'll be outcry in the community, to be honest. And I don't think that's what we want. I think we want buy-in from the community. That just takes time. So I think having a big inclusive committee, being very inclusive to the community, having, enough community meetings so that people could buy in and give their 2 cents on the stuff, I think is really important. And if we don't, I think if we try to fast track this, I think, the press is going to come out on this. People in the community are going to be, like talking about this. So I don't think it'll look good if we go too fast and we look like we're skipping some steps.
The other question is this a hourly wage or is this a salary? I mean,
Right now, it's a salary. It's $1,000 a month. It's moving to $1,600 a month if the voters agree. Right? You mentioned earlier that benefits and retirement were going to have to be taken into account. We already get benefits and retirement. So I don't,
we do?
yeah,
Retirement? I don't think so.
we do. I know because I signed up for it and
Oh,
it's
really?
almost my entire.
What kind of retirement do we get? I didn't hear about that one.
I think that it wasn't one of our big points of being, I don't know.
I don't think so. What is that?
PARS?
Huh?
I think it's PARS, right? PAR.
So how do we get retirement? I didn't know about this one.
Well, we'll discover that later on. I think you need to talk to HR. Yeah, it wasn't one of the big things on my mind when I signed up to be city council.
I put my whole salary toward retirement because it's.
That's a savings. That's just like a 401k. That's not retirement. It's not like the pension staff gets. Staff gets pensions. We don't get pensions. Not
It
that I
is-
know of. Yeah, so I think that's different. So for staff, like if you take if a staff member makes 150k, they actually get 300 because of pensions. We don't get that.
So I think that's if we just, I think, like you said, all of this is part of the discussion for the committee to determine whether these are things that we add in or not, that is added in or not. But I was also thinking your comment about having a former city manager, perhaps that might be a good idea to have as the moderator. Thoughts?
Just for clarity, are you envisioning this as a consulting assignment or seeking volunteers?
No,
be
keeping
honest,
to be honest,
it may be difficult to secure a volunteer, but
no.
never know.
Okay, so you're saying the moderator might want to be compensated to do this?
I suspect that may be the surest way to have it proceed. But again, at the committee's pleasure, we can follow up accordingly.
I think that's the other thing is, so how much is this going to cost us? You know, getting a moderator, what is the cost? I don't know what other things you might think about that might be a cost to this advisory committee. Mm,
One cost down the line, whenever you get there, would be the actual cost to do the ballot measure itself. And so just something to keep in the back of your mind, but that's at the end of the process.
Thank you for the reminder. Um, Any other comments? Anything that we can set forward, Madam?
Maybe, and unless staff has it already, but maybe it'd be great to know what some of the nearby cities are doing and how do they, the process they use to increase council members' salary, right? I actually don't know like how they do it. So if you guys could do some of that research, I think that would be great. Because I think the committee is going to need that anyways. But that's maybe some work that staff could start working on ahead of time. And that way, when this committee when it comes up, there's kind of like here's policies that Mountain View does, here's policies that Menlo Park does, here's policies that Los Altos does, et cetera. And then yeah, that might just kind of make things a little bit more smooth.
Thank you for the suggestion. I wonder how Sunnyvale sets their, I think Sunnyvale would be one city that has compensation. We can explore that. Or is that something that the advisory committee was supposed to explore? We're just setting the parameters for this advisory committee. So we can go the route of what Ms. Gaines had mentioned, having application and people submitting application for council to consider, or for the policy and services committee to consider. So that's one way.
I guess I feel that all of this information should be publicly available, comparables, and so it wouldn't be unreasonable to ask the newly formed Citizens Advisory Committee or Council to go gather information. If we could empower them to do that, that should mean we utilize far less staff time in order to get this done. I think it's probably fruitful for them to do the work of it, to try to read the articles and understand the pushes and pulls. If they're to become truly informed enough to really make a reasoned decision, it's probably good that they do the work rather than be handed the work that somebody else painstakingly did. I think they'll own it more if they do the work of figuring it out. I want to remind us that this is coming to us because we feel that many people in our city can't afford to serve the city at this level, because a $12,000 stipend for this many hours is unreasonable, and we're bumping it, we hope, with the ballot initiative to 19,200 a year. But that is still far below minimum wage for this work, for this number of hours that are worked. So we are doing this to try to make it possible that people at a lower income level could serve their city. People who are younger, people who are renters, people who are working class, lower middle class, middle class. That's our purpose here. And I hope we will end up with a process that is thorough and deliberate and gives the public opportunity to own this and understand it. And I just wanted to put this frame on it. I don't think there's a single person involved in this that is in it for themselves. We're in it to try to ensure that our future colleagues are truly representative of the city socioeconomically and in every other way.
Okay, so I am going to propose, if we're going to give a recommendation for the creation, then I would say that we go with the application process for 11 to 15 members, that it is a Brown Acted committee. The timeline is about 2 to 3 months to recruit or to get applications out so that we can get applicants. And then that from there, it'll take approximately 12 months in order to come up with how to move forward on this salary or no salary, or go to voters. So we could see what the committee comes back with their recommendation. And within that they do the research and find out from what other cities are doing that do have a salary. I mean, that does provide compensation to their council members, so that council can decide. That's what I gathered from our conversation. Yes, please, Councilmember Taylor.
Are there actually, I didn't know, are there other cities that don't give any compensation at all? Do we know? I know the school board doesn't get compensation. I think they're purely volunteer. At least our school board, I could be wrong about that, but I think our school board doesn't get compensated. Does anyone know? Okay. But I don't know if there's other cities like that too, but that would be interesting. As far as I know, I think we're the only city that doesn't get reimbursed for expenses. That's one thing I think I know, but I didn't know about the compensation. That would be also interesting to know.
It looks like Portola Valley people receive $0.
Oh, okay.
Anything else to add to the parameter that I might have forgotten?
Should we like make sure that it's well advertised, kind of like as we do for our commission and board, just so that it's really, we cast a wide net, we get people kind of all walks of life in our community. So I think there should be some sort of robust recruitment program so that because I think we don't want people thinking, oh, I didn't hear about this thing to the very end. We want people to know about it early on and be able to weigh in, and maybe even a mechanism for people to kind of give feedback or thoughts on what they think, so that so if even people who can't really actively participate, they could still give their thoughts and weigh in as needed.
Could we add that a certain number or a certain percentage would be people with government service backgrounds? So however we would characterize former city managers, somebody like Mary Egan, who's an advisor to cities. I think somebody, a handful of people that have this breadth, can really kind of scope the context for the committee, for the remainder of the committee members, I think would be helpful. Perhaps 3 former city, if it's an 11-member committee, at least 3 who've served in a city government position in HR or at the city manager's office.
I said with former municipal experience. Does that work?
I think I would put in HR or the city manager's office.
Did you catch all that?
We did. On that last note with former municipal government experience, would you also be open to someone who served on a city council somewhere? That's not necessarily on the staff side, but just offering that as another way of, when you state it specifically in HR and city management, you narrow the pool pretty quickly of available people. So I'm just trying to make sure that as you advertise broadly in your very broad social networks that folks that are tangentially connected to what you're thinking may still have an opportunity to apply.
I appreciate the constraint of HR and city manager, so I'm happy to remove that. I do agree that someone who'd served on city council would be great, and there are probably other city staff positions that would also be great. I think we'd want to be clear that nobody currently in the pipeline for service in this city is eligible. Nobody on a current board or commission. They could be future council members one day, and so it'd be a potential conflict of interest.
Would you say like former council members in Palo Alto would be okay, or do you think?
As long as they're not going to run again, but you never know. in
That's
our
kind of
city.
hard to tell. Or perhaps even, council members who've moved here, right? Like someone from Portola Valley who moved here or something like that. That might also just, I didn't realize Portola Valley didn't get any compensation either. But I think school board doesn't get paid, right? I think that's what someone told me, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, if they don't get paid, it would be kind of interesting to get their perspective as well.
Huh? Okay, so is that enough parameters that we can send to council, or? I think it's a start. Do you feel that it's sufficient, or?
Well, I mean, the only thing is like, again, I think we should shoot for 15. We may not get that many interested people, but I'd rather go larger just because especially for something as that could be as sensitive as this, I just don't want to leave anyone out. And there's a very good chance we only get 11, or maybe only get 5 people who should want to do this thing. It's very possible. I have no idea. But I just think we should be inclusive. And so if there are 15 people who in our community who really feel strongly about this, it's far better that we hear about it from them on this committee versus at the end when they think that they have no way of influencing or having their say heard. So I just think we should be very inclusive. And 15, I think, I doubt there's going to be 15 people in our city who feel super strongly about this, but you never know, right? I've been surprised before.
Okay, then we'll go to 15, application process for 15 applicants.
And is the thought process that the people will be approved by the city council?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
So how would that process look then? Would it be like we vote each person one by one, or we do like for our commission, boards of commission, we select the 15 people we like best? Is that how would the process work? Oh, I had one other thought back to the other committee member. What if we say that anyone that serves on this cannot run for council? So that way, run for council, right? So that it kind of addresses the concern that my fellow committee member had. So that there's, you can't say, oh, like I'm approving, a pay raise that I'm going to get, something like that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
We can always. I think we can always recommend, right? And because it goes back to council.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to address what,
Oh,
yeah, what was said earlier. If that could be something, I don't know.
I don't know that we can restrict somebody's
Exactly.
future plans to run for office. Which is why I just think people who are current boards and commission members are, they're very much in the pipeline. And I think it would be safest for us to exempt them. I think they're a little too close to it.
Another
Madam-
consideration could be just recommending that members that agree to serve on this committee could not run for council this fall or the fall after the work is done, something that, oh, sorry, just kidding. Never mind. Can't require it, but yeah. Got it. Never mind.
I think we can go ahead and put that up. Mr. Clerk, do you have some of the things we mentioned?
I have one more thing to add in case
Mhm.
it's not in there. I do think it is important to have socioeconomic diversity on this group. So we have an area median income and we should say, we should tie it somehow, or we should have bands that are represented.
Wouldn't that be through the application process that they apply and then council will be looking at the application and making sure that we have,
Yep. I just think we signal that this is an equity issue by stating who can, like we have at least 4 members who have former municipal government experience to help scope context. It might be nice to also say, members reflect a broad spectrum of socioeconomic diversity.
you wanting to add this into a motion for where?
For me, it does rise to that level. It's just as important as the 5th bullet that speaks to the benefit of people who've been in municipal government.
So we,
Well,
yes, please.
I was just going to offer that if it helps your thinking, it may be important to also consider what will happen next in the application. And so, for example, the application would ask anyone who's interested in volunteering for this group whether they've had municipal experience, probably to describe it. So not unlike when you select a commissioner, to ask about areas that you're seeking to select the best candidates for. The socioeconomic diversity may be a bit tricky on an application to determine. So just offer that for your awareness. And then to the earlier question on how the selection is made, I am reminded of when the council selected members of the housing element working group, that you had a matrix of candidates, and to the extent self-identified, how they satisfied the various criteria that the council was using for that selection. And that one, I think, was much more complex than what you're envisioning here, unless you add more categories, in which case it could then get a bit more complicated for the selection.
Can the application ask what they do, their employment, what is their employment? What their job is?
profession.
Yeah, the profession.
Certainly, for example, you do that with commissioners on your commission applications now.
The question of economics is a little bit more complicated than just asking what someone currently does for work. As an example, as we are doing a survey right now of our board and commission members to find out whether we have any socioeconomic diversity amongst our existing boards and commissioners, you can't just ask what someone's current work is or their current income, because they could be retired, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the same as a low income person who's in the workforce and earning a lower amount. So we have a few ideas that we're doing, which we'll talk to you about next month, actually, in our race and equity update. It is complicated, I think, to try to capture the variety of people with levels of wealth that are serving on your committees. There's a few ways that we've come up with that we think may help, but some will feel it's a little intrusive because you have to ask a couple of questions in order to capture actual wealth and socioeconomic status.
So Councilmember Lythcott-Haynes.
You could ask an open-ended question like college admissions offices are doing right now, saying something like, we are interested in representation from a broad swath of the community. Please let us know if you've had an experience related to being lower income or something. Like, we could signal what we're interested in and see what comes.
That could be part of the application without asking a question of that invades privacy or whatnot.
Yes,
Okay.
because when we've asked we asked a question before of what's your socioeconomic status, and a lot of people said adequate, good enough. comfortable. So I think particularly targeting the question of whether someone represents as low income may be another twist on that that would give you the information you're seeking.
Maybe we want to add another bullet point to say that application should have a preamble or have a short paragraph that indicates just a question.
Are you
Should,
related to this, the lower income connection? Is that what you're alluding to? I think you can just note it as a question that can be added to the application and we can work with it from there.
application should include a question. I thought we said that we're going to signal.
Yeah.
So open-end, can you help with that open-ended question?
Application should solicit experience being low income in our city, something like that. I don't know. It's hard to do this on the fly. While we ponder that one, I want to go back to bullet 4. 12 months to come up with how to move forward on the salary changes process. I think what this committee has to decide, that to be created committee, the Citizen Advisory Committee, has to decide if there will be an increase above the 1,600 that we assume, but who knows, the 1,600 proposed to be put to the voters this fall, right? This is sort of part B. Does it need to be increased above the state amount? And if so, what should that increase be? Do I have that right?
The 1,600 does not need to go to the voters. That will come back to council. Council can do that by ordinance. So that will happen.
So that will happen. The 1,600 is happening. This committee is part B. Should it be increased above that? And I would think it ought to be made super clear, 12 months to come up with, should compensation for City of Palo Alto City Council members be increased above the state, we call it the state maximum? The state maximum of $1,600 per month. And if so, what that increase should be. Don't take all that away. I think it's that bit about they do the research to find out, right? It would be like committee should research
Committee shall,
shall research comparable cities as benchmarks. Something like that. Is that cool? And that first, you in the fourth bullet, 12 months to come up should, I think it should say 12 months to determine whether compensation or to recommend whether. I think they would ultimately be recommending to council, right? So to recommend to council get rid of determine whether compensation for council members should be increased above the state, I don't know what that increase should be. Okay, that's getting there.
Mr. Clerk, I think committee shall research comparable cities maybe to determine how to determine. On the last bullet, I'm not really sure that it should be a question. I think it should be what you desire. Something to the effect of saying that the council is looking for a committee that has a diverse membership of all socioeconomic status.
What if instead we get rid of bullet 7 and we augment 4 to say, the committee shall be broadly representative of the Palo Alto community, including, nope, sorry, the 5th, my bad, the 5th bullet. The one that says have at least 4 members, to me, the 4 members who have Muni experience is related. It's the composition of the committee. So I would open that bullet actually, Mr. Clerk, with, before it says have at least 4 members, I would say the committee should be broadly representative of the Palo Alto community according to various measures, and let's just leave that ambiguous, and shall have at least 4 members who have former municipal government experience. And then I think council, as we go over this with them, can noodle over what we mean by broadly representative, and maybe they'll want to say socioeconomic, and maybe they'll want to say gender, and maybe they'll want to say professions. I don't know, but I think that's enough to signal that we're looking for broad representation.
Councilmember Tanaka?
Yeah, I like that suggestion about representation. I think that's critically important. I think one thing that happened to bullet 4 as that was edited is it got rid of the thing of that this eventually go to the voters. So I think that's to me really important, because I don't think council members should be approving their own salary increase. So I don't know if Clerk, you could put that back in there, but I think this should eventually be a ballot measure that goes to the voters. It was in there, like something, basically, it should be something to the effect that that the work will eventually be recommended as a ballot measure for council to put on the ballot for the voters. So something along those lines, right? Because I think in the end, the final decision maker for this should be our boss, which is the voters, the people of the city. And I guess we shouldn't presuppose they're going to say yes. So we should be, if they think that there should be a salary increase, there will be a recommendation to council to put this as a ballot measure for the voters to decide.
So is this bullet, Mr. Clerk wrote,
Yeah, just maybe
sufficient?
if an increase is recommended, have a recommendation for council for a ballot measure, for the associated ballot measure.
Okay, Madam City Attorney, can I just kind of get some clarification in my mind? The 1,600 is already approved.
It hasn't been approved, but you've directed us to bring it back. It will come on consent,
consent.
and then you will approve it.
And that is at SB 329's state amount, maximum amount.
Yes.
Now, if, say, for example, we go to 20,000, or maybe, let's say 5,000 a month, does that still need to go to the ballot, or it can be something that the city council can decide?
I'm sorry, this is not a straightforward answer. What has to go to the ballot, Councilmember Tanaka is correct, and it is required that it go to the ballot.
Anything over SB 329?
Well, what you need to take to the ballot is your charter currently says that that council compensation is limited to what the state provides. So you have to, at a minimum, remove that, and then you have to replace it with something. It could be that it gets replaced with a number, and maybe it could be a number and an escalator, and then council never touches it again. It's just in the charter. But you could replace it with a rule that says council can set the salary by ordinance, or council can set the salary by ordinance, but no greater than what some other public official makes. So some cities do that. They have a percentage of what another public official makes. So there's like a cap on it like that. So it's up, it could be either way.
Okay. So essentially, this is going to the ballot measure so that we can change the language in our charter, and it could be a dollar amount or just verbiage that council can change salaries for council members.
Yes.
Okay.
Or there could be an independent commission set up to change them. There's a lot of options there for how it could, what the replacement mechanism could be.
And is there a supermajority, majority in order to do such a task?
Simple majority to place it on the ballot, simple majority to adopt it.
And then the electorate? I mean, people who vote on it, does that, when it goes on the ballot and it's for vote, when the people vote, is it a simple majority? Or would it need a supermajority in order to pass this change to the charter?
It's a simple majority.
Simple majority, okay. Thank you. I think I've already asked for public comments. Do we have any further parameters to set, or is this sufficient? Yes, sir.
One question for you to consider as you close this out is whether this goes to the city council if there is a unanimous vote on consent, or you want to have a full council discussion of these parameters.
I would like to have them have a full discussion. So we don't have who moved and who seconded. We managed to do the language, but okay. Anybody move? After all that language, you're not going to let it die, are you?
I'm struggling with the fourth bullet, 12 months to recommend to council. I feel like it needs to say something like the committee shall have a term of, or the committee shall conclude its work within 12 months with a recommendation. How about that? The committee shall conclude its work once, yep, within. How about it, then it opens with, once constituted, the committee shall, because it's not 12 months from the start, it's 2 to 3 months for the application process. So I think bullet 4 opens, once constituted, comma, the committee shall conclude. And just and right there. And then on the third line, after 1,600 a month, and if so, comma, what that I feel better about that now. Are we good? Good. I'll move the motion as written.
I'll second.
I do not need to speak further to the motion.
I don't either. Councilmember Tanaka, do you have anything you want to say?
Well, I think this is the right process. I still disagree with increasing the salary, but in terms of the process here, just seems to be on the right track.
So I will say, I agree with Councilmember Tanaka. I do not really favor this, but I am going to support this motion so that it does go to council in order for council to discuss, only because we need to advance it. And it was a directive from council. So I do want to put on record that I do not support, that I do not agree with having a salary. But yes,
With having a salary increase or having a salary?
salary increase. I'm sorry, salary increase.
And I want to say y'all convinced me to increase the number of members. I was thinking it should be small. I was really listening to you on how critical it is that the community, broadly speaking, have the opportunity to really grapple with this for an extensive period of time. So I really appreciated your guidance, both of you, on that.
And it is going to be going back to council to be vetted, and it will go out, if whatever happens, it will have to go to the voters. So, I think that given its giving it an opportunity to be vetted is definitely something that I can do. If there's nothing else, Mr. Clerk, will you please take our votes? No, wait, I'm sorry, Councilmember Lithgat Haynes.
So you've both just said something really important, which is that you're not in favor of increasing the salaries. Do you want to state for the record why that is?
Personally, for me, when I decided to run for city council, it was a public service to serve the city. I'm not rich, I'm not wealthy at all, but I have a comfortable living and I really value community and giving back and representing the people. And so I'm doing this as a public service. And I didn't come in here for compensation. I guess it's never been part of what I had wanted. When I go on business trips for the city, I do get reimbursed. I also have learned so much in my position, working with staff, working with my fellow council members, and from the general public. That's a lot for me. And so I think I'm satisfied with that.
I'm actually happy to answer. I think I voted last time against this, and so I'm not going to surprise you. But I'm definitely not rich. I think I bike every night, and so I'm not driving fancy cars or anything like that. So certainly not in the upper echelon of Palo Alto for sure. But I look at the founding of this country, and the founders in the beginning of this country were they weren't professional politicians. They were kind of like us. They were part-time, right? I mean, I kind of view this as kind of like a volunteer position. I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because I live here. I want to have a great community here. I want to make it better. But I don't look for it towards as compensation. I look at it as just a way to give back. I've always volunteered my whole life, even when I was much poorer. Because I think that this is how you build communities, is by giving back and getting involved. And I encourage many others to also do that, is to get involved. And so I don't look at this as a career or as a way that I can build wealth. I view it as a way to give back to and I think it's better than having I think it's only probably the last 100 years or so in our country that we have the concept of a professional politician, where people are politicians, that's their career. But I actually feel that our democracy functions better when there's rotation. So for instance, like, it's actually, I think it's good that there's term limits, right? I think it's good that there's rotation. I think we get better diversity, better perspectives. People are able to kind of cycle in, cycle out, and have different perspectives, but it's not anyone's real career. And so my fear of, large compensation, now, and I think it's entirely different than expenses, right? I feel like expenses that we do for our job, I think is totally different story, because even for things that I volunteered for, I usually got reimbursed for my expenses. So that's different, a totally different story, because you shouldn't lose money doing this. Definitely not. But should we get rich doing this? I don't think so. I think to me, I think fundamentally our democracy functions better when we're more like citizen politicians versus professional politicians. And so that's why I feel very strongly about this. Why I just but I do like the fact that we're having kind of a very inclusive process. I think that's important. I hope whoever does serve in the future serves not for the money, but out of the spirit of helping the community. And I kind of like Paul Alto's non-professional politician ethos, right? That we're all kind of we're basically volunteers essentially. And now we get a little stipend, but I don't think that's one of us does this. But that's kind of my thought. And I kind of actually wish this happened, even not at our level, but just at all levels of government, where the politicians aren't fixtures, right? They're not, the incumbents doesn't last for 50 years. It's more like there's rotation of people in and out. We don't look for it as a career. We look for it as a service to the people. And so I actually think that it's healthy, because when you're just a politician, you don't really understand what else is going on, because you're always politicking, right? Versus if you're a citizen politician or a volunteer politician, you have your day job, wherever that might be. Maybe it's real estate, maybe it's tech, maybe it's whatever. And I just think that the people are served better when we have a makeup of our leaders like that versus professional politicians, which I think is kind of evolved over the past 100 years, which I don't agree with.
And I'll add, well, first a question to you both. What do we say, when you're estimating to people how many hours this job, this service takes a week, I know we all have different numbers, but what do you tend to say?
It's a full-time job.
You tell them it's a full-time.
It's a full-time job, but then I also have my own job. So I make adjustments, and that really, it depends on what you want to put into this job, into being a council member. And we have our set hours at council meetings and committee meetings, regional meetings, but also how much time do I take to go and speak with my constituents who ask to talk to me, so there's a lot of time, and it can become a full-time job. But again, it's a public service.
And Greg?
Yeah, I consider this as a passion project, right? So it's something which.
But hours.
I don't really keep track of the hours. I kind of, it's like something you like to do, you don't really consider as a job, right? You kind of consider it as a passion, right? So it's not like I measure how many hours I spend on a passion. I don't do that. I mean, I'm doing this because I want to help the community. I want to make sure it's served well. And so, yeah, I simply don't track the hours. But I hope other people who serve think of this as a passion project, not as a job.
What are your hours?
Yeah, I don't know. I have conservatively said about 30 hours a week when I add up the meetings and the packet prep and meeting with constituents. And And so what I want to say is I completely agree with you that it should be service and that it is a passion. I agree. It is for me 100%. I'm not in any way suggesting anyone be in this to get rich. I don't imagine the numbers that would be recommended by anybody would lead to richness. I want us to be aware of who cannot do a passion project and who cannot serve their city with a full-time job because they're already working 2 full-time jobs that don't make them, as much as we make in our one job. So this is about trying to ensure, like our mayor right now is a renter. He's a public school teacher, and I don't know how he does it. I admire it. The reason I'm in favor of this is I don't want our city to be governed by the wealthy who have enough money in the bank such that their mortgage is paid for, their bills are paid for, their luxuries are paid for, and they can, afford to put in 30, 40 hours a week to the city because their financial circumstance is so flush. I just think the city misses out on the best possible governance if only people with that level of financial means can serve. So I am deeply interested in figuring out, is there a higher compensation that might make it more likely that somebody who is a teacher or who is in a profession where they don't, we all are, you have flexibility as a realtor, you get to set your hours a little bit. You don't have a boss telling you when you have to work.
Well, my clients are
Your
the boss,
clients,
and
no.
it's actually their time, so I'm on call.
I mean, what I mean is if someone works an hourly wage and their boss, you have to be in at 8, out at 5, you have to take a 10-minute break. Those folks don't have the flexibility in their work life that you do and that I do. I think all three of us have a degree of flexibility that many people don't. And a little bit more compensation might make it possible for someone to say, you know what, I will serve my city instead of getting that additional part-time job to make ends meet. And it's that group. For me, it's purely a socioeconomic diversity issue. That's why I'm interested in seeing, is there a higher number at which, we might end up recruiting, a set of people who presently cannot contemplate serving their city and reaping the joy that we get from serving our city and also bringing their diverse perspective to the mix.
Yes, Councilmember.
Sorry, I just want to kind of address that because I'm certainly not wealthy and I'm certainly not flush with cash or anything like that. Anyone that's seen my bike could attest to that. I've always kind of volunteered at this level throughout my life, whether it's in high school or, when I was in college or whatever. So I guess I don't know if you have to be, I mean, a lot of people spend this kind of time surfing or this kind of time watching movies or this amount of time, playing video games or whatever it might be. So I mean, my video game is, or my passion project isn't surfing, or it's kind of this kind of community service that we do. So I hear what you're saying, but I also think that people can choose and pick what kind of hobby that they do, and whether you're wealthy or not. And even at a time when I was, making less than minimum wage, I helped the community, and so I don't know whether just the wealthy could be helpful, because I certainly know that I lived in areas which were, I lived in Pasadena when I was in college, and it's a very expensive city, and I volunteered and I helped out and I did a bunch of things. So I don't know whether it's true that you have to be wealthy to give back to the community.
Okay, so shall we advance it to council? Will you please take the votes, Mr. Clerk?
Chair Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lifcott-Hames.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. Our last item is future meetings and agenda.
I actually had one more thing on this item, if I may.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I think the conversation we just had is instructive. I think if we could get, what's it called when the minutes are more detailed? Summary? Summary minutes of this conversation, I think will help inform council. I think these are important perspectives that have been raised about whether to do this or not. And it might save us time at council if we have some of this that we just discussed very richly here as part of the transcript, if you will, that goes with the staff report. I don't know how my colleagues feel about that. I would prefer that rather than, they could all watch the video and go to like hour 3 or whatever this is of the PNS meeting. But rather than reinvent the wheel, it might be nice to have some of the arguments in place based on the conversation we've just had.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Yes, we will as long as they're available. Sometimes the summary minutes take a little longer to provide.
Okay, future agenda topics?
Yes, and I'll be working with the chair offline just for the rest of the committee's awareness. We will include the work plan for this committee at your March 4th discussion when you're also looking at your council objectives for 2024. But just for March, at this moment, I have that sort of crystallized. We'll have the summary of the recent race and equity work. Some of our dialogue today is a really good segue into those conversations. We'll have the follow-up to your discretionary funds referral item that you discussed today, and I anticipate at least one audit item. I don't know what it is yet, but typically we have a placeholder for at least one audit.
Thank you. And with that, we're adjourned, and thank you very much for the advice and for being here today. Thank you. Have a good